to the show with your friend and mine. So tell me, Dr. Squee, who's it gonna be this time? We like to hear you talk, but we love to hear you listen. And if you are not subscribed, you won't know what you're missing. So welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Headphones up. Here we go.
Hello and welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. I'm Dr. Squee and this is my show. Today we couldn't be more honored to be welcoming a legend between art departments. So he's worked on such films as Gremlins 1 and 2, Rocky 4 and 5, Beverly Hills Cop, Master of the Universe, Beetlejuice, Back to the Future 2 and 3, Bill and Ted, The Addams Family, Hook, Quantum Leap, Babylon 5, Pulp Fiction, The Hobbit, and Star Trek, to name just a few. Please welcome to the Dr. Squee Show, the legend that is Michael Moore. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing fine. Glad to be here.
You've really kept yourself busy over the years.
Oh yeah, always.
Right when I came onto the call, you were just finalizing your latest project. Is it kind of hard to keep yourself kind of going from job to job working freelance?
No, not at all. No, it's every job is just a job. You know, it's some of them there's passion into, some of them it's just, I'm just going to do that. Yeah, whatever. You know?
Are you ever surprised when they come out, which turn out to be the bigger projects than you'd expect?
In some cases, because in some cases I'm doing one piece of the whole show. Right. You know, like I one of the films I was working on, which I had no idea what it was I needed to make a bunch of rubber jewelry. Yep. For rings and necklaces, belt buckles, and so on. And I didn't know what it was for until I saw the commercial on the, I think it was on YouTube. They were listing out all these little, these movies coming out. And I was watching one of those YouTube videos that said, here's coming attractions kind of thing. Yeah. And it turned out that the pieces I had made were for Netflix's Bullet Train.
Yeah, that did all right.
Yeah. And so I was like, oh, that's what that's for. Because when you're doing something for a show, in some cases, you don't know what the actual name for the show is until it comes out.
Right.
It's like on Star Wars Return of the Jedi, it was Blue Harvest.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you never know from time to time what you're actually working on, unless you're in the know. And on that one, it was like one of the people came to me and said, I need all these in rubber, in the next couple of days.
What a fantastic movie as well. I'm not surprised they have to have everything made out of rubber on that, because the chance of injuring yourself on that set might have been very high otherwise.
Oh, yes.
That's wonderful. So what was it for you which excited you about going into art and going into props and things like that?
Well, okay. Well, I've had quite a few jobs throughout my life.
Yep.
Early on, I worked in retail, worked at a comic book store. I worked in aerospace for a while. But from high school up until after aerospace, my hobby was actually doing horror makeup.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, I was called on the phone. One of my friends goes, I'm leaving this job. Can you be here tomorrow to take my place? And I said, oh, okay. And that was Reanimator.
Wow.
So I was on set makeup with a whole bunch of other talented people. And, that was one of those shows that kind of made me think, I don't necessarily want to be that close to so many people. There's background reasons for that for that film, as well as a couple of other films. But in the end, I was like, yeah, okay. I continued to do makeup and stuff like that, as well as working on specialty projects. And ended up finally just kind of going more into doing props and costume pieces and stuff like that. Because on Beetlejuice, I was doing like I did the Flat Man.
Yes.
And I did because the Flat Man that you actually see traveling on the wire was a radio control head that I did. And then there was a bunch of other different scenes that were cut out in the film, like when Beetlejuice comes out of the grave. It wasn't supposed to be Michael Keaton. It was supposed to be this other puppet thing.
Right.
And then, but they cut that all out, and then it became just Michael Keaton coming out. At that point, I was also doing, Masters of the Universe. I was done at Bob Short's. Beetlejuice was Bob Short's. We also did, what was it? Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future. And that was all armor, just like the stuff for Masters of the Universe. We did 72 suits of armor in 6 weeks. That's start to finish. And then being on set for 6 months.
I mean, Master of the Universe is, I think, a very unique claim to fame. It's one of those films which technically probably the plot isn't maybe the best of any film you've ever seen, but it's so loved by people just for the kind of fun of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's I'm not ashamed of any film I've ever worked
on. Nope.
Because in some cases, like, well, yeah, see right there, that I did that. Oh, that looks really good. Right. So, my job was done. Write the script.
Unless you've got a problem with the armor, it's not my department.
Well, no. I mean, armor or creature effects or so on. Like I also worked on Munchies.
Right.
Okay. I also worked on but low budget films all over the place. Some of them I don't even remember what they're called, but it was like whatever, all my stuff worked,
And from other conversations I've had with prop makers from a little while ago, I spoke to Ronald B. Moore, and it sounds like whether it's an independent feature or whether it's a big Hollywood studio, it's always about what the prop maker can get away with, how you can work around things, and your creativity seems to be always key. Because like a big budget film doesn't necessarily mean that you get the budget for the props. Has that been your experience?
Yes. Sometimes some shows, all their budget's going toward the actor.
Yes.
Or towards special effects. It just depends. Most producers who know what they're doing make sure that there's a good enough budget for each department, but you never know, because once you have a director who comes in and goes, well, but I have this vision of the script, so I need, more stuff, and it's like, well, it's not in the budget. So sometimes you just have to be creative and, work things out.
That's great. And you mentioned Beetlejuice already. Now, you spoke about directors as well, about them with their particular vision. There's obviously such a distinctive look to all Tim Burton stuff. Yeah. Was there kind of like, do you get given a color palette? Do you get given illustrations? How does it kind of start with you going into something like that?
Well, you got to think on Beetlejuice, the color palette was black and white.
Some green in there, I think.
There's some grays, some greens. um, in some cases you do, in some cases you don't. Tim Burton likes to illustrate all of what he wants. So in some cases, the production designer gets his drawings done by Tim Burton, and Tim Burton gives those to the production designer and goes, "This is the style I'm looking for." And you hope that the designer that you've hired gets it and can emulate that style. I think on Beetlejuice, I'm not sure who designed what in reality, except for the designs I saw personally from that Tim Burton himself presented to that person to give to us. And I think that whoever did the rest of the design work for the sets and so on was right in with that vision, and that style. I can't complain about that film. It was actually a lot of fun to work on that film.
Great. Gremlins was one I definitely want to speak about. Such a visually beautiful film. I think the first one wasn't necessarily the biggest budget. How was it working on props and art for that?
Well, and that was the thing is from my side of it, working on those films was doing props for how do I put this? It was doing props for the Gremlins, because since they're puppets, they all had to be very lightweight.
Yeah.
Okay. And other things we did, like the Mogwai cage. Okay. We had to do that in 2 sizes. And that was all done in actual wicker.
Right.
So we had to do all the weaving, all the bending, all the everything for that. And it had to look the same as the small one as the big one. I think the small one was probably maybe 24 inches wide, and I think the larger one was closer to 4 feet, because they actually did do a larger Mogwai puppet for most of the close-up scenes.
Right. So just make it look in scale.
Yes. And it's like in the second film, when they're in the company, and they're going through and they're in like the lunchroom or something, and some of them have pudding cups in their hands. Well, those pudding cups are lightweight, but you need to make them look like they have pudding in them. So we ate a lot of pudding at the shop that week because we needed the containers and we didn't want to waste it, because we all liked pudding anyway.
Yeah.
So we cleaned them all out, and then we had to make fake pudding on the inside that would stick to the plastic, so that when the puppets were holding it, it would look right. As well as the fact that it had to be lightweight once again. We even did electric drills that we had to hollow out and take as much weight out as possible.
Right.
So it's that type of thing. You have to take everything into consideration for what you're doing.
And I think there's a lot of actors who can learn from your your way of doing that. The amount of times I see someone picking up a cup of coffee and going, "Yeah, anyway, so this." You think about the weight. I appreciate that.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, because I'm also one of my hobbies is making puppets.
Yeah.
And I've been doing that since high school. And I've made stuff for shows like Munchies and stuff. I've done puppets and done puppetry for films. And so I know what it's, when you have if you make a puppet and it weighs, 10 ounces. Yeah. Well, when your arm's all the way up like this and extended forward, because you're always, you're not doing your puppet like this. You're doing your puppet a little forward.
Yeah.
So the head will be at the right point. And then when you're doing the talking and stuff, that your arm forward like that, you know, if you go through it and know anything about fulcrums, that 10 ounces is now like 3 or 4 pounds. And you're going to be doing this for quite some time.
Yeah.
And you have to hold it there. And you can't just do this because in your hand's in the shot.
Yeah. I've
So
got friends who are puppeteers. I'm in awe always.
Yeah. So the more weight you can save, the longer the puppeteer can do his job.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And I also love the fact that you've just gone through the pain of weaving these baskets, which must have taken ages, and then you get at least pudding afterwards. So it swings and roundabouts in your world.
Well, it was all kind of when we're doing a full film in a shop.
Yeah.
You're not working on one thing at a time. In some cases, like for the wicker, you have to soak the wicker in water to make it pliable, because when you get raw wicker, it's as dry as a bone, and if you tried to bend it when it's dry, it wants to crack. So you have to soak it to get the fibers wet so they'll be flexible. So while you're doing that, while you're soaking the piece, the wicker, you're over here trying to work on this particular project. It all depends on how many people you have in your shop and how many of those projects you have.
Yeah. I can just imagine the plate spinning involved in that must be, it must be a very specific skill.
Well, you know, you have people who specialize in everything, but myself, if I have something that's really, really specific that I need to have somebody do something, then we'll get somebody who's an expert in X. But if it's something that's kind of generalized, I like to have multiple people who are, you know, jack of all trades and master of none, because it ends up working out easier and better in the long run. Because then if you need help, you can call somebody from another project.
Right.
And they'll go, oh yeah, okay, let's just get this work.
That's brilliant. So you've got the versatility to be agile on a project.
Well, yeah, and you should be pretty agile mentally with all these projects anyway, because, you know, as projects are rolling in, you don't really know what you're going to get until you have it.
Right.
You know, it's like on Star Trek, I would get a call from Bob Blackman in wardrobe, him saying, come down here, I need you to help me work out this specialty fabric. So in some cases, we would actually make the material the costume's going to be made out of.
Right.
You know, so okay, so we needed to have, you know, like from Enterprise, there was the guy from the future. I forgot what his name is. Okay, but his suit was all ribbed.
Yep.
Okay, well, that material, we had to make all of it from scratch. So it was it's rubber with spandex backing. So we literally took the rubber, made a mold, made a master of the piece, put rubber into it, laid the fabric into it, and then laid rubber back on top of that to, you know, sandwich it in wet. So when it cured out, you peel it out and you have a piece of fabric that now you can cut, but you can also still stitch into it and it'll hold a stitch because of the spandex.
Wow. Yeah, I'll never look at that episode again the same way. Daniels, it was, I remember.
But that's the kind of thing you end up having. You need to work those things out, because if we would have just cast it as a rubber sheet, and they would have stitched through it, eventually the stitching would have just ripped right through the rubber.
Yeah. It's these things that the rest of us mere mortals don't think of, that you have to get every single detail on. Back to the Future was one I wanted to ask you about. So you worked on 2 and 3, is that correct?
Yes.
So which of the models did you work on for that?
For that stuff, we were doing the let's see, I have to remember go back in a way back machine here.
Sure.
One of the things that I was working on is in the bathroom, there was a box on the wall that had a monitor in it, but it also had like a electric toothbrush, a water pick kind of thing for your teeth, and a hair dryer, but it all came off of that block.
Right.
So all that was custom made, custom designed, so it was all futuristic. And then also there's also one that was also made for the kitchen, which was automated paper towel dispenser and automated. It had 3 points on it. One was a paper towels. The next one was wax paper, and then tin foil.
Yeah.
And then a few other miscellaneous pieces here and there throughout. Once again, when you get something, sometimes it's very mundane.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just thinking of where these are in the McFly household, though.
Right. Now, the other thing I also worked on was his jacket. The one that was like really big on him, and then it went
size adjustment fit
and self-drying, right?
Yes.
So my job on that, and that was when I was working on that particular part for the jacket, I was working at Precision Effects, and I'm the one who made all of the buckles.
Yeah.
That were on everything, like the pieces up here between, so all the buckles and attachments that went between all those parts, because they had to be dual colored. So I had to what they call co-molding, but not with an injection molding machine. I was doing it all by hand. So you would cast up one piece as a base, pull it out of this mold, stick it in that mold, and then pour another material into that to back it up so it had 2 different colors without having to paint it. They didn't want to paint those.
Right.
So,
I mean, that's just like, obviously you've worked on so many high profile films and TV shows, but like that jacket is so iconic that would sell for millions, I'm sure, today.
I think the last one sold for something like $80,000.
Still not bad. Okay, I may have overshot it a little bit, but that's not bad. That something you've worked on is now worth $85,000.
There's things that I've worked on that were more than that, but yeah.
Can you say?
Well, let's see. There's different pieces of Star Trek history that went for more that I've worked on. There's I used to do a lot of restoration for auction houses.
Okay.
So I did a little bit of preservation for the original Blade Runner pistol.
Yeah. And
that sold at auction, I believe, for $250,000.
Wow.
But I mean, I've handled things that are $1 million, archive original pieces from different films. I've messed with stuff from the 10 Commandments, as well as Ben-Hur and Cleopatra,
And like when you're restoring something, like I'd be scared to even touch it. How kind of fine is that work? And do you ever get nervous when it's something that you're familiar with?
Well, yes and no. I try and put that out of my head.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to help me try and figure out how to fix it if I'm too worried about what it is. You
Of
know,
course.
well, a lot of people, a lot of prop makers and prop masters and so on, and costumers, during production, they just need to make sure that the stuff looks good and functions properly. After the film, it's who cares?
Yeah.
No, and that's the
Yeah.
way it's been since film started.
Sure.
It's only recently that things are being archived for the history of film industry. So and only recently have they been doing, like, at the end of, for Discovery 2 and 3, season 2 and 3, or
Yeah.
sorry, 1, 2, and 3, whatever it is. They ended up doing auctions to sell off some of the costumes and stuff, which went to the general public, and they got some pretty good money out of all that stuff. And in many cases, some of that money that they're auctioning pieces off is going toward paying for the CBS archive, so that they can keep the other stuff that they are keeping in the archive in good condition and in a proper way of storage.
Yeah.
It's like as if the Smithsonian needed to raise money, and they've got 12 of this. They're going to sell 2 of them off for as much money as they can and put that money back into, the curation of all those items that they already have.
That's great. We've got a question from the floor. This is Kath Harper. Hi, what's the most complicated item you've ever made?
Well, okay. That is a very difficult question, because in some cases, very difficult things can come very easily or very hard. And and what you have to remember, like, okay, if I'm using an example of Star Trek, okay, we never had any more than 6 days to build anything. Okay, so, and in some cases it was 2 or 3 days or overnight. On Voyager we did the Hirogen rifles.
Yes.
And those are over 4 feet long. They're silver, and that's actual chrome metal on top of them. So those were vacuum formed originally, and then they were electroplated, and then everything had to be installed in them. So that was difficult because we had 6 days, but it takes a day to plate them.
Yeah.
And it took a day and a half to make the original sculpture, to make the vacuum forms for.
Yeah.
And then after you've done that, you have to make the vacuum form parts and so on. So in the end, we were just, as we had to deliver them to set, we were just finishing up in the car, gluing pieces in place.
Yeah.
So that's a Hirogen rifle, but there's also the Smart Bomb. The Smart Bomb is also over 4 feet long, and it was also electroplated, but it had, and that was actually more difficult to construct than the other pieces. But once again, it's 6 days. You after a certain amount of time, you get your mind in a certain mode, and it's like, okay, so I have to go from here to here in this many days. Okay, go, and you just do it. So it's really hard to say what was the most difficult, because I also have to look at it from the standpoint of, just in Star Trek, I worked from first season of Next Generation, all the way through DS9, all the way through Voyager, all the way through Enterprise, then the movies from Generations through Nemesis, I think it was, Nemesis.
Yep.
And then I also worked on the first JJ movie.
2009, yeah.
And then also now I've also worked on stuff for Discovery. So it's a lot of stuff, and that's a lot of projects. So it's kind of there's hundreds of props. One of the most difficult weekends we had was doing the Bajoran rifles.
Yes.
Okay. So they needed a Monday morning. We got the drawing Thursday evening. So we had to make the entire model and all the parts, then make silicone molds and start making copies of the rifles, get them cleaned up, paint them. And we weren't just doing hard plastic versions of these. We were also doing stunt versions, so rubber. And rubber is actually more difficult to deal with than it is resin. So we had to have something like 14 of these rifles finished for Monday morning at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Is this the point where you go, well, I think the Bajorans carry light, small weapons which are quick to make?
That's not up to us.
I know.
Unfortunately. But I mean, so, it's just one of those, you just have to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
It's kind of like being, and I don't want to really compare it to this because it really isn't the same thing. So don't get me wrong, but it's like when you are a soldier, you need to be prepared for whatever comes your way. Now, once again, big difference between a soldier who's in any kind of combat or any situation and us. It's just a mindset of you need to be prepared for anything that can possibly come up because you never know.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, having to remake a tricorder on DS9. Was it DS9? Yes, it was. DS9, having to remake an entire tricorder so it had a functional LCD screen on it overnight.
Yeah. I always wonder about things like that with these iconic, the phase of the tricorder, certain iconic things in Star Trek.
Yes.
Is there anything which feels like, right, it's got to include this, it's got to have this part of the look, but at the same time you're reinventing it? How do you put those two together?
Well, they called me up on the phone and said, we need you to do this. And I'm like, okay. I had just enough time on that project to be able to run out to the mall to Sharper Image, who had a active matrix mini television.
Yeah.
At the time, an active matrix television, because an active matrix LCD screen, when you're filming it with film, doesn't have the lines that go up. So you don't have to try and sync the two things together with the frame rates and stuff. And at that time, a little tiny LCD TV was, that TV, I think, was over $600 at the time, because it was a new kind of technology for doing active matrix. So I ran out, bought it, brought it back, had to tear it apart and hope that I wasn't destroying any of the circuitry while I'm doing it, and make it fit on the inside of an open Mark 6 tricorder.
Yeah.
Get it painted, get the vacuform body assembled with all the plugs in the back that I still had to have access to, which was power and the AV plug that would end up running down the back of their hand. Get it into affix it to the body, close the body up around it, sand the crap out of it, and hope that you don't get too much dust in any of it, and then actually still paint it too, and then try and put whatever details you need to do so.
Wow.
Because when I did that, I had to deliver it at 5 o'clock in the morning to the studio after being up for that much time, over 24 hours.
Yeah.
And then it had to go into a driver's hands, who then drove it up to the location they were shooting at.
Just incredible. Just the level of work that goes into that in such a compressed period of time and on no sleep. What, just to sort of like jump onto another job, we'll go back to Star Trek in a bit if we can. Quantum Leap. That show, it's kind of, you could have worked on anything because it's set over so many different time periods.
Yes.
What did you work on for that?
Well, there was one episode that had Egyptian stuff in it. I don't remember.
Cursed Tomb, I believe.
Yeah, we made basically the case that has the canopic jars in it. We made the jars that goes into it and everything else, painted it, all that stuff. And then there was, I think it was an episode that had a guy called Captain Future.
Yeah, Future Boy and yeah.
Okay, well, his contraption that he sits in with the fan blade behind him going and the lights and all that, his time machine.
His leaping machine.
We built that.
Wow, I love that episode. That must have been so fun because I remember that like it had to look homespun, but look able to do this thing.
Oh, it was very much homespun.
But it's kind of what, as a child, you want a spaceship or a time traveling machine to look like. I love that. Thank you for telling me about that. My friend James, for some reason, and by the way, I just want to give a quick shout out to ReTrek podcast. I'm on it with my friends. Please do check it out wherever you get your podcasts. This interview is being put in association with. But my friend from that, James, he's obsessed with Rocky 5. So he worked on a couple of Rockies. But is there anything you can tell us, an inside story from Rocky 5 for James?
Well, I mean, there's not a whole lot to talk about for that. I mean, we. To be honest with you, I don't remember exactly what I worked on the Rocky films, except for we had stuff coming in, stuff going out. And to be honest too, I don't remember watching anything but Rocky 1 ever. So, because most of the time if I know the movie, I'll go see it just to see if I can pick out our stuff. But in many cases, like, since I didn't see the films, I don't know.
Fair days.
But there was a lot of stuff, like in some cases, gloves would come in and we'd have to paint them.
Yeah.
Because they'd buy standard gloves and paint them however they want. Or like in some cases, we would make some of the banners, or if there were, I seem to remember somewhere in there that the fans outside or something holding up signs that said whatever.
Yeah.
It's that type of mundane thing that the prop master has to deal with.
Yeah.
Because it's a handheld prop. It's a prop. So
James, look out for those banners on Rocky 5. I'm pretty sure that they hold up the banners for the outside, because that's the one they fight in the street. So
yeah, and it's always there's like in some cases it also could be that we made all of the police equipment, like the walkie-talkies, the badges, the fake rubber guns, rubber batons. So, like I said, there's all kinds of mundane things that we end up making all the time. I mean, it's very surprising,
Yeah, complete. I would be very remiss though if I didn't ask you about The Hobbit quickly. You worked on the 3 of the films.
Yeah, I worked on all 3 because all of them were being made at the same time.
So can you tell us a bit about some of the props you made for that one?
Well, I worked on a lot of the props for, is it Lake Town is what it's called? Did a lot of the hand props from that. Because Lake Town people didn't have a whole lot of real weapons. So they were, like they would take a butcher cleaver and attach it to a branch of a tree.
Yeah.
And let's see what else. I mean, it's just a lot of stuff, knives, swords. But as far as the Lake Town stuff was a lot of fun because it was like, okay, guys, we need like 150 unusual props besides the swords and shields and helmets and stuff like that. Like I worked on some of the assembly of the Lake Town guard helmets. And I also worked on the prototype for the white and brown wogs. What else? I also did all of the orc shoes.
Yep.
For all the orcs.
An orc's cobbler, that must be a wonderful thing to put on your CV.
Well, yeah, because they needed to look like something an orc would use that is kind of like from that realm. That was one of the important things about The Hobbit as well as Lord of the Rings is everything had to have that element that it was made from what was available and the mentality of those.
Yeah, of course.
So in some cases, some of the orcs had looked like forged metal plates on their feet. Other ones looked like it was could have been hardened leather with spikes, or made out of tree bark.
Yeah.
Things like that. So but they still had to be able to be secured onto a foot. So they were all built around a shoe that would fit the actors. And some of those actors for, I don't remember the names of the characters. Sorry. One pair of the shoes was something like a size 26.
Wow.
So it was massive. And that had to be, all decorated out. So I worked in the prop shop. I worked with some of the costume stuff, some of the creature stuff, which is the wogs. It was just, days filled with all the fun of making that stuff.
That's great. Another question from the guys from ReTrek. So Elliot has asked, he's a huge, I think we've all got interesting views on Star Trek V, but one thing that we're obsessed with on our podcast is the rock monsters that were meant to be on it. Was there any discussion of rock monsters? Was there anything drawn? Was there anything preliminary done in the rock monster world that William Shatner originally wanted?
Not that I know of. Oh, well, okay. Let me say this. There more than likely was a lot of drawings done trying to perfect the look of it, but I do not recall ever seeing any of it.
Good enough. And you have worked on so many Star Treks. Do you ever like? Is there a sort of like signature you try and put in your stuff to go through the years, or again, is it just kind of like I've got the job, this is what I'm making, this is what I'm doing?
Well, it depends on what you say, like signature. Like, okay, in some cases we may put our initials on props.
Oh, not a literal signature. I just meant it's like, so if you're creating something for back in Next Generation days, and then you're creating something for Voyager, is there anything you try and kind of like keep the continuity of in there?
Well, in some cases, the continuity has to be taken care of by the designer and illustrator.
Yep.
Okay. But and you have to think about it from the standpoint of is you had Rick Sternbach and Andy Probert on Next Generation.
Yep.
And then you had and I'm going to butcher his name, Robert Delgado, I believe is his name. For some reason in my head, I cannot keep his last name squared in my head. And then you have Jim Martin and John Eves on DS9, right?
Yep.
So certain things, you know, Starfleet things tended to be connected, you know, within reason.
Yeah.
And I'll say within reason because, you know, once again, you can have a drawing that was done by John Eves that looks like it connects directly with Next Generation Starfleet. But then when the director comes and goes, oh, but can you change this a little bit to the. So you have to look at it from that standpoint is some of the stuff is driven completely by trying to be, you know, this is Starfleet, but you have all those bumps in the road because you have other people's visions for those particular episodes.
Yeah.
And then you have all those other alien things that are suddenly being presented, you know, and sometimes like some of the Cardassian stuff, obviously on Next Generation and DS9, they don't mesh too well.
Yeah.
You know, like the original Cardassian costume and Next Generation with the hat with the
and with the handlebar mustache, which yeah, that he wore in the first episode.
So it's stuff like that. So you know, but people also have to think about it. Well, some Cardassians maybe use that as their as part of their costume or their uniform, and others use other things. So you know, there's going to be a progression of sophistication as a full series is going on. You know.
Yeah, and obviously in Deep Space Nine, it's a Cardassian space station. You're going to have lots of Cardassian architecture, loads of props and everything. And you know, if you can't be too constricted by what's gone before when you're expanding it out in such a way, I would imagine.
Exactly. And you know, and you've got what? How many races were introduced during DS9?
Exactly. And Deep Space Nine seems like it would have been a particular challenge because you've got to balance out, right, it's a Cardassian space station being run by the Federation and the Bajorans. So you've got three worlds you're kind of like meshing into one. That must have been so challenging to work on.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, believe it or not, it was probably the most fun of the three main first three, because when you had Next Gen, you 90% of your time you were making Federation stuff, and then you had a little bit of alien stuff here and there mixed in. When you went to DS9, you had Cardassian stuff, Bajoran, Ferengi, Jim Hadar, you know, one-off alien characters for episode 17 of the third season, whatever, and then and of course you had Q come back in at one point,
Yeah.
So that was very very creative atmosphere, because you weren't restricted to Starfleet and one character. You constantly, in some cases, had to have all this other new stuff, which was, to me, refreshing and fun. And I'm not saying I didn't like DS or Next Generation or Voyager or Enterprise. It's just that there was just so much going on DS9 that you could be Monday morning could be, okay, we're doing the Galapagos Island people, from sector 42, blah, blah, blah. You're like, okay, who are they?
Was there a bit of sense of that on Voyager as well? Because where they were traveling through the Delta Quadrant, obviously each week there'd be a new sector, so there'll be,
to an extent, yes. But see, on DS9 and Next Gen, we would usually get drawings of all these things.
Right.
But not everything. Some stuff we would be creating on our own and go, hey, what do you think about this? Oh, I like that. Let's use that as but you're going to have to paint it Cardassian colors and stuff like that, on Voyager, during the first couple of seasons, most of the stuff was Rick Sternbach drawing it all out.
Yeah.
Well, that all works. That's great. Enjoy making his stuff. But then, in some cases, the prop master would just come in and describe something to us without a drawing, and we would just have to make it. And we're like, okay, what does that mean? Did
you enjoy doing that?
Well, yeah, in many cases, yes, because it once again, it opened up your imagination, going, okay, you got to be creative today. Better know what you're talking about when you're, dealing with the Halon group. I don't know what that is.
Is this one of the times when you, because one thing I absolutely love, and I love looking out for it in Star Trek, along with other shows, is when a prop's cleverly reused, where it's kind of like had to be spray paint and putting on his head. Is that time to go to that stock?
Well, in some cases, that happens because of budget.
Yeah, of course.
Or there isn't any time. Can you just repaint that?
Yes.
Okay. Or in some cases, there's no repaint. It's just they're going to turn it upside down now.
Yeah.
But and you know what? That's fine, because people trade things all over the universe with technology and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, that's, you just do what you're going to do. It's one of those things of, until you're in the moment of doing something like this, it's almost impossible to describe to someone who's not doing it.
Yeah.
Because the way certain people's creativity is sparked is not how other people's creativity is sparked.
Definitely not. That's very true.
It's and in some cases when we're put in that position, we're like, oh, okay, because we'll get our own ideas while working on the show, going, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we had this? And people go, yeah. Well, we don't have a budget for that. So it's like the Mark 9 and 10 tricorder. Okay, that was designed by me and my deceased business partner, Steve Horch. We designed the entire thing, all custom. And that's why they suddenly changed on DS9 and Voyager at the same time.
Right.
And the same thing with the boomerang phaser. Okay. Yeah. The boomerang phaser was the word came down from on high, and we were told that they wanted a phaser that was more ergonomically designed. instead of the Dustbuster or the Cobra. Okay. And we're like, really? The Cobra hasn't been out that long. So they decided that we were going, so we said, okay, we'll make something up. So Bear Burge and myself set out to make different phasers so that with different curvatures on the handles, and then sent all that off to Rick Berman, who decided that none of them were the right angle, and he gave us one that was in between. Said, make it between these two pieces. And we're like, okay. And that's also what ended up becoming the first contact phaser.
Right. Have you got just another 5 or 10 minutes?
I've got as long as you need.
Oh, sir, that's music to my ears. So I did want to go through some of the movies. So Star Trek 6, one of the best Star Trek films, like still regarded very highly. What kind of things did you get to make for that?
Don't remember.
You don't remember? That's cool. We will go straight past it. No problem at all.
There's lots of stuff that, like, once again, it could have been one thing or it could have been 150 things.
Michael, with everything you've made, I'm sort of glad when there's something that you don't remember so I can get to other bits in a kind of perverse way. Generations. So that was a handover film. So it would have been involved props for both original series movie time and Next Generation time. Was that kind of fun to work on the different texts from the different times?
It was, because we were just, people were asking us what's what and so on. So we ended up making an old style hypo spray, 2 of them, that Chekhov, I think, was using on whatever his name was, the guy who was from the Nexus,
Sure.
and then ended up using it backwards. We ended up making a bunch of on Picard's desk.
Yes.
There's all the weapons behind him and stuff. All of those. We ended up making a tricorder that got from all I know got cut from the film, which was a mixture of a new design that we came up with and the front section from a Star Trek 4 or 5, whatever. Tricorder was the front, but the back of it had an active matrix screen in it because they wanted to show some stuff on it. And then I think it got cut from the film entirely. And anything that any of the phaser, basically any of the standard stuff that would have been on Next Gen and that type of stuff. So anything that was standard for Next Generation during Generations, we made.
Right. And
including all the communicators.
Oh man. Yeah. And then there was First Contact, which is the Borg film. Did you get to work on any of the Borg side of things?
No, the Borg stuff was all made at Todd Masters' shop. And one of my good friends is the one who made the spacesuits for the show.
Yeah.
So we made the phasers, the tricorders, the communicators, all the different rifles. And there's 3 rifles. There's the round nose, the square nose, and the EVA rifle. So the square nose came first, then the round nose, and then the EVA. And if you notice in the armory room, when they go in there to first talk, there's all these square nose phaser rifles in there.
Yeah.
There aren't any round noses in there that you can see visually on the screen as far as I can remember. But when they're done in there and they come out walking as the Magnificent Seven coming down the hallway, they're all carrying round nose phaser rifles.
That's an easy explanation. You know, Picard waits until the cameras are away before he opens up his secret arsenal.
Well, and the thing is that rifle, that the change to that rifle was made overnight.
Yeah.
And they had to have all those rifles ready for the next day. And then the EVA rifle wasn't even originally going to be made. They were just going to use the round nose or square nose for out in that scene, outside in space. Then they decided at the last minute that they wanted it. And if I remember correctly, it was a 2-day job to make that rifle, because they had to sculpt it and then make molds and then make the castings.
Yeah.
And just so you know, I have the original master sculptures for all 3 of those rifles.
Great. So if you ever want to start up your Star Trek arsenal there, you're ready to roll.
Yes. I mean, yeah, most of the stuff that I worked on during, I mean, I'm not everything, but most of the stuff I personally worked on or was in charge of, I have those masters still.
Yeah, well, that's great. And going into Star Trek 2009, obviously kind of quite a few years later, there's I think they did such a wonderful job of getting the feeling of Star Trek, but kind of still moving it forward. Do you remember the things which you were working on for that? So
on that one, we did the, if when you see Kirk and McCoy in a big long hallway, and you see people all the way at the far end, and they're walking past, and they have these white and black blocks. Those are pads,
right?
Which were like completely out of like what? But whatever. I didn't design them. We just had we built those up with some electronics, so lights blinking on them. We did the medical scanner with the little on it. We also did the medical tricorders. What else did we do? Oh, we did the salt and pepper shakers for the bar.
Yes, the Enterprise ones
that they broke everything on, and he's like,
yes.
And then what else did we do? We also did for the Klingon cutscenes, we did this thing that was a neck grabber that the Klingons would use on their prisoners.
Right. Yeah.
And I think there's I think I posted the video of it kind of working on my Propology 101 YouTube channel. But I'm trying to think if there was anything else. Those 2 things, that piece. I think there was one other thing, but it doesn't come to my mind right now.
I'm guessing you grew up with the original series.
Yeah.
Is there an extra element? Because like with Next Generation onwards, you're part of it being invented as you go. But with anything with the original crew or even the 2009, does that have a special kind of like, is there any fanboy moment for you on that?
Okay, well, let me tell you the sad thing about Star Trek.
Okay.
From Next Generation all the way through until like now, it was always frowned upon for you to be a fan of Star Trek. And everybody talked amongst themselves, but they never were like public of that they liked this and that and so on. So for me personally, yes, when we ended up on DS9 doing Trials and Tribulations, that was like, okay, we can do something now. And so we did the tricorders, the phasers, and the communicators, as well as the writing pad and the Spock built ray generator.
Yeah.
So that was, that was one of our ta-da. Yes. Okay. Here you go.
that seems to be the one episode everyone talks about being that special moment as a fan growing up, then being part of it.
Yeah. It is. I mean, when you link it to the original series, The Trouble with Tribbles, you kind of go, okay, see, we got some continuity going. And believe me, in the art department with Mike Akuda and everybody who was there working on it, it was really, it's gotta be perfect. This has got to be this. Oh, the other thing we built for that was on the space station, they couldn't find the chairs. So we had to actually make new chairs off of, we had one, and we ended up making a mold and making copies of all those chairs because there wasn't enough available.
I mean, I've got to say that episode is it's just amazing on every level. It kind of like nails it. Like every one of those props is just flawless. The original, every one of those kind of special effects still looks great to today, which is no mean feat when you've got people literally in a lineup next to the original crew. You guys I'm going to gush a little bit here, but just the level of detail and love that went into that episode. I just want to thank you so much for that.
Oh yeah, that was one of my favorite episodes of DS9.
I'm not surprised. Just before I let you go, I'm going to just touch on a couple of other bits outside Star Trek again. One was the Addams Family, because I know I've got a lot of people who are fans of that particular franchise, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So for that, we did swords, different elements that were sitting around the place. There's a curved like knife that has a curved handle on it and a blade.
Yeah.
That is being moved around all over the place, and then they toss it up in the air, I believe, and it comes down. I'm trying to remember. It was one of those moments when I was watching the film with my wife in the theater, and I went, that's what that was for.
That's lovely. I love the fact that just you make it right. Elaborate sword. There you go. It's like later on.
Well, yeah, and those were rubber knives that we were doing for that. So I was like, oh, okay, because it's when I was at that shop, we were working usually on 3 or 4 films at the same time.
Yeah.
Because it's like when we were working on Dances with Wolves, okay? We made everything from cavalry stuff to Indian stuff, American Indian stuff. Arrows, Winchester rifles, dragoons, flint knives, battle hammers, and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes some things just get washed away into the crack until you go, oh, that's what that was for.
Yeah, the 18th arrowhead to the right. I think that was one of mine.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, and mundane things like we used to manufacture cameras, like big, bulky production cameras that were fake for all the different shows that we worked on, and they were rentals because of the fact that one of the cameras of current to that day might have been $180,000, and nobody's going to give that camera to an extra to carry around.
Yeah, I can understand that.
I mean, the rental camera is still about $15,000, but it's something, if it gets a bump or a bruise on it, that can be fixed, and you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. Pulp Fiction. What an imaginative and a just so many different looks again in that film.
Rubber guns, rubber knives. I think one of the guys who was working at our shop at the time is the one who ended up making the wallet.
Yeah.
But once again, knives, guns, batons, police equipment, everything you would think that, oh, you could just go to the store and buy all that stuff. You know, it's just a mundane thing. But when you're doing anything that has stunts and action like that, you have to make sure that you have stunt versions of all of that stuff.
Yeah, again, that's another one where I can picture scenes where I'm like, yeah, I would be very thankful if there was a rubber version for that particular scene.
Yeah, you'd be amazed on certain cases. Like one of the, I don't know what film it is yet, but I just recently built these, or didn't build the whole thing. I just recently molded a bunch of components for a red TV set, an RCA TV that's going to be thrown out a window.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what the film is for or anything else, but it's a vintage, like 1950s RCA television, and it's just going to be thrown out a window.
I will be looking out for that now in the next few months coming. Just a final tip. So Stargate, you know, again, you're kind of creating a look which would go on for years after that in the TV show.
Stargate, that would have been working at Precision Effects. They were, we were, when I was there, I wasn't there that often for that project, but it was working on the staff weapons that had to open and close.
Yes.
As I said, I didn't work on it that much. I didn't work on the mechanism. Somebody else had already worked all that out. I think it was, for me, I think it was just basically doing cleanup and, you know, getting ready for paint on that particular project.
And just finally, I hope you do remember something like, just as a favorite of mine, but Bill and Ted.
Bill and Ted. Okay, well, so Bill and Ted, you have all those students sitting in the classroom, and they've got these day glow pink knobs sticking out of the desks.
Yes.
We made the receptacle for that, as well as the keys that go in there. We also made, when the guys come in, bursting in, and they plop the stand down, and then this big ball, they go, and then it opens up.
Yep.
Built that.
Great.
And that had a functional TV in it, and all that day glow paint and everything else in it. In fact, that piece is actually at a store here in Burbank, bolted to the ceiling.
Yeah.
In a place that sells movie clothes.
Wonderful.
Wardrobe and stuff. So
okay, I will let you go in a minute, sir. Thank you very much for being so generous with your time. But just before I do, we get people watching this who and listening to the radio show, and I think it kind of serves as a like a how-to for the future of how to kind of like get into this stuff and everything. If you had to give one bit of advice to someone going into this and what it takes to do what you've done throughout your career, what would it be?
Okay, well, most people tell you don't.
Yeah, I've heard that one a lot.
Okay, but if you really want to get into this, a lot of stuff nowadays is like, you want to do specialty stuff. If I were starting off right now, I would say learn Illustrator, Photoshop, a 3D program of some type. Start messing around with with making stuff out of different materials, like whether it be wood, Bondo, body fillers, Bondo, acrylic, styrene. Start trying to learn how to do maybe vacuum forming and stuff like that. Because if you have if you're still in school, okay, or even if you're not, you can go back to school. Taking one of the theater classes at a college, or usually college level, they will have stagecraft classes so that you can learn how to do certain things that will be directly transferable into the film industry as well. Maybe even take some, in that same college situation, some costuming or clothing, some sewing classes, because you never know when you're doing something for a show. You may need to make a strap that has Velcro on it to help keep it closed, or a belt buckle that needs a belt buckle attached to it. Stuff like that. Things that you would take for granted, that that's wardrobe. You never know what you're going to end up doing, unless
so there's a lot about expanding your skill set constantly.
Exactly. And if you ever at the point where you say, I've learned everything that I ever need to know about what I'm doing, then you're wrong. Because you're always need to be learning. And how do I put this? If you have children, okay, if you have a child, you will learn more things than you ever thought you could, because now you're a parent and have to help them understand what that or this is. So when you go, you don't want to be the parent and go, I have no idea what that is, son. You're going to go and research it so you can get back to them and tell them, well, son, the hydroelectric properties of this are.
So that's what you do with people coming up to you with illustrations, like, just give me 1 minute. I'm just going to pop away and watch YouTube. Art department.
I didn't have YouTube.
No, okay, YouTube. You're going to consult the encyclopedias or whatever technology was available at the time.
Yeah, worm technology, yes. So basically, for me, I always was watching a show called Reading Rainbow, even older on, Sesame Street, and so on, because they're and different shows, because there would always be, they'd be going to like a factory.
Yeah.
Okay, like How It's Made, the show How It's Made. Okay,
we had something over here called How To, which I think is quite similar.
Which is like kind of like the precursors were all on public television, like going to a factory and showing how things were made. So,
okay.
A lot of people, as I have been working in this industry, are like, well, that's a lot of useless information until you need it. And we were working on toys with Robin Williams.
Yeah.
And they wanted to make a bunch of real glass ornaments. The blown glass ones with all the antique looking ones.
Yeah.
And my business partner at the time goes, well, he wants to know how to, if we can do this and so on. I have no idea how this. I said, oh, okay. Well, what they do is they usually do, if you're doing a short run, they do a mold out of carved wood that you can close up and blow into. It does scorch it, but it's carbonizing the wood inside so it actually stays in shape. And when you open it, you have a finished ornament basically until you go through and do the silver nitrate process on the inside of it or something. And he's like, how the hell do you know this? I said, because I watch and learn. You know, and a day before that would have been useless information.
Yes. I love that, sir. Thank you so much. Like, I feel like any guest I have on which has worked in TV and movie, there's always something kind of like I look out for when I watch the films again. So like sometimes it might be someone who's in something which I never noticed before, and I'm then now looking for them in the background. With you, I think now on all these projects, I'll be looking for the knife that lands on the ground. I'll be looking at the tricorders. So thank you for telling us all about the wonderful work, and thank you for creating such a wonderful look for these TV shows we've loved throughout our lives and movies.
Okay, well, thank you for having me.
Oh, just before I do let you go, when this goes out on radio, is there a song I can play for you? Anything you like?
Is there a song?
Yeah, is there a song you like or anything that's been in your head?
You know, there's so many things I really like out there. But you know, there's Oingo Boingo, you know, Dead Man's Party, there's all kinds of different stuff, you know.
Oingo Boingo it is. So guys, if you want to hear back this interview with music added, please listen to the Dr. Squee Show, Tuesday 6 p.m. till 8 p.m, sw20radio.co.uk. And as I say, please do check out ReTrek podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Thank you very much, sir. You have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, day as it is for you. I always forget the time zones. I've been Dr. Squee. That was my show. In a world where you can be truly anything, please be kind.